Okay, so Absolute Superman is here, and I don't like it. Now, hold on. As with anything that I do on this channel, I like to walk through the reasons as to why I don't enjoy something. Because hating something outright for just being a thing is fucking stupid. So, let's take a step back and talk about both Absolute Wonder Woman and Absolute Batman. I think out of these three, Absolute Superman is the weakest issue number one. And I was kind of waiting to see who was going to be the weakest. I was kind of hoping that all of them were going to be great. Absolute Batman was a fantastic opening. Absolute Wonder Woman was also super strong. Not as good as Absolute Batman, in my opinion, but really, really good for the way in which it builds up the world that we're going to end up walking across to explore. Absolute Superman doesn't do that. It feels a little bit too scattershot in regards to everything else. Let me explain. So, in Absolute Batman, you have the introduction of the Batman character. Not only do you have the introduction of the Batman character, you get a little bit of that sprinkle of that mythos in the background. You get a little bit more of that history, what drives him and makes him the person that he's going to be, and then you get to see him essentially operating as Batman. For Absolute Wonder Woman, it's almost the exact same thing. You get this really, really interesting setup for the mythos, which leads into the hero essentially operating in present day. And then you get to see exactly how she carries herself in regards to being Diana, revealing that at her core, she's just like every other Wonder Woman we've ever seen. Absolute Superman attempts to follow that exact same trajectory, but for me, it just doesn't work out. And what I mean by that is the story that they choose to tell in Absolute Superman is interesting because from the beginning, our boy grew up on a farm, which I feel as though that's going to be the core of every Superman story going forward. The idea that Clark Kent grew up on a farm, Kal-El in this universe grew up on a farm with his mom, with his dad. You get this really, really interesting and rich Krypton where it's basically Cyberpunk 2077. And there are the rich elites and the poor workers who are essentially laborers. If anything, it reminded me of Transformers 1 that we just got, the movie that just came out. The idea of, Sentinel Prime ruling from the top, and then you had these poor Transformers whose cogs were removed, and they're basically just mining for energon. That's what the lower caste in Krypton basically does. The symbol for Superman, that shield, that S, it doesn't mean high class and honorable like it does in the main universe. It means essentially low class slave, where your job is to basically go into the mines and mine for ore. And then when you're done, it's your job to go wait my table and go water my flower garden and go clean my house and go wash my car. And it's so weird seeing all of these low class individuals wearing the symbol for the House of L as they go about their day-to-day duties. But then also it's so interesting watching how society basically suppresses the people of Krypton. Where if you have an idea, even if you're a 7-year-old girl, you have an idea of wanting to go out and see the stars and visit other worlds because your planet is capable of basically space travel, but instead they spend all their money on luxury and decadence. An 8-year-old girl gets suppressed. You get banished from the oligarchs to become a low class serf. Or if you're someone who has this rising, shining future ahead of you, where you're supposed to be one of the great five leaders of your planet, you run into a situation where you're not you're not on the same wavelength as the people that share your class. You see the plight of the average man and you want to aid them. And as a direct result, you admonish your fellow peers of your own societal rank for the fact that they're basically just they're destroying the planet and they're suppressing people, and as a direct result, you get suppressed as well, and you get thrown to the bottom of the cast. That's interesting. That story is cool, and I understand the direction that they're trying to go with. They're trying to show, the juxtaposition between how that is how things are on Krypton, and how when Kal-El arrives on Earth, he's hoping to find something new in some way, shape, or form, and instead he finds the exact same issues that were on Krypton, just more primitive on a planet that doesn't have the ability to basically produce its own energy or travel to other worlds. And it kind of depresses him. It causes him to put up a wall between both him and humanity. This is where the issues begin. The story that they choose to tell about him arriving on Earth and traveling through all of these different areas where people are poor and destitute and going to help them, it's Superman coded, but it's not as interesting as the story you told in the first 5 minutes. It's kind of like the hook of the story, this view of Krypton, the way in which you're exploring the planet and seeing how things are, where you have to pay money to get rain at your farm, where you can't take your machine into the city to get it repaired. Otherwise, they may take your machine and then they may throw you in jail. Awesome. Interesting. It's a better story. If anything, I was more interested on the events that were going on Krypton than I was when we finally transitioned over to Kal-El essentially operating on Earth. I was like, I'm not really vibing with this. Then the Peacemakers show up and I'm like, cool. But at the exact same time, I'm not really vibing with this. Like, I feel as though instead of the Peacemakers being just regular jackboot soldiers, I feel as though when the special forces arrived later on in the issue, those should have been the Peacemakers. Like, they should have been the Rick Flag, Lois Lane, Peacemakers. The Peacemakers should have been the top tier elite unit instead of being the bottom rung cannon fodder soldiers. That's what I was kind of sort of hoping for. That's what I was wishing for. That wasn't actually the case. I was like, you guys just exist to get like two shot. And then when you get two shots, essentially over for you guys until not Rick Flag shows up with Lois Lane to basically arrest Kal-El. And then it's all over really, really fast. Where both Absolute Batman and Absolute Wonder Woman kind of set up the journey that these characters are essentially going to go on. Superman gets arrested at the end of this. And I was kind of hoping that he kind of didn't, where maybe something would happen that would separate him from him and Lois Lane from the rest of the forces. That can still happen in issue 2, but I feel as though the setup for Absolute Superman with Krypton was so good that when you're pulled away from Krypton and put into the actual story that's going to be progressing as this series goes on, it's kind of like, I kind of wish that we would have spent more time on Krypton. I would have, in all honesty, liked if it had started off with Clark reminiscing. Maybe he just arrived on Earth, like he's reminiscing about his world, the things that went wrong on Krypton while he's assisting people. Then you jump into the story of what's going on Krypton with Jor-El realizing that the planet may be doomed, his mother basically going around and helping out these other farmers so that you understand the values that he essentially has. Get to know a little bit about Kid Kal-El, the way in which they did for Diana with Cersei, where you get to see Cersei basically raise her through the years through like this really, really nice um 4 panels on a 2-page spread, where just going down each panel, you go through her being a child and her being a preteen and her being a teen and her being a young adult, and then Cersei basically armoring her and sending her back out into the world. That should have been the approach taken for this. Instead, it feels as though we're jumping in different locations way too fast. In my opinion, I think it was a little bit too soon to both tease who the villain is going to be. Like, I know that argument doesn't really hold water because of the fact that we got the Joker tease at the end of Absolute Batman, but I feel for Superman, if we're going in that direction, I would have preferred if the person he met was like Jimmy Olsen, or if the person he ended up meeting first that's going to change his trajectory in this universe would have been a curveball, and it was Lex Luthor. And then maybe eventually down the line he meets Lois Lane. Maybe it's Lex Luthor, and then the person working with Lex Luthor is Lois Lane, and they're working together to basically try and figure out who this guy is. And then behind the scenes you kind of tease who the big bad is without actually revealing who the big bad is, because when you reveal that it's Brainiac, it's just like, it's Brainiac, and he's not Krypton Brainiac, he's alien race Brainiac, because he sees Superman with the crest and he's like, who the hell is this guy? What do the symbols mean, Mason? But so far all we can do is sit back, wait to see whether or not it's going to be a little bit better. I'm fucking excited for all this shit. I'm just saying that in regards to the three that we've gotten so far, between Absolute Batman, Absolute Wonder Woman, Absolute Superman definitely has maybe the weakest of the opening arcs, but I have a feeling as we get more into Krypton, as we explore more of the world with this version of Kal-El, I'll probably end up liking it more and more, because I was really fucking digging the um the Krypton stuff in the beginning. But let me know if you read Absolute Superman issue number 1. Comment down below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.